Wow. I don't know what questions we got answered. I know there are a lot more questions
Yeah.
raised, but what did we learn and what do we still need to know?
Well, I'm dizzy right now. I'm pretty tired of the way everything has gone over the last, 6 weeks to 4 days to whatever you want, whatever timeline you want to attach to it. Amazing today that they only took 12 minutes of questions for the general manager and the team president on a day as sort of landmark as this one is. Actually, Friday was the landmark day, and we're 3 days removed from that. And we're getting our first opportunity to ask questions, but only as many as can fit in the 20-minute window that's taken up by an 8-minute opening statement by the team president. So, like I'm still sifting through it. I think the biggest takeaway, Dan, is that Kevin Warren is in charge of this program right now. For better or worse, he's going to be the guy that is driving the ship. And, for years, people wanted things done a different way here. They hired Kevin, a little less than 2 years ago, and he got on board 19 months ago to start his job as team president. And it's his show now. And, so 2025, like your fingerprints are going to be all over everything. And you better have some sign at this time next year that this organization is pointed in a positive direction.
It didn't feel like the dreaded vote of confidence, but we heard what he said about Ryan Poles, Dan. So I'm wondering,
Final
where,
say.
where does this leave him in this new organizational tree of life, if you will?
I'll just tell you this. I'm not sure if you guys watched or just listened.
I just listened, but I saw some pictures and I saw a few short clips on the artist formerly known as Twitter.
Ryan looked exhausted. He looked a little bit embarrassed. He looked, almost shrunk. He's a big man who many times has stood up at that lectern or sat at that table and projected command and confidence. And I didn't feel that today. I felt like a guy who regretted some of his past decisions, understandably so, who is kind of dealing with the failure of everything that this year has been, and has now sort of ceded control to the team president to a large extent, and what they're going to do when they go drive this coaching search, which is going to be absolutely high stakes. And there may be no bigger search that they've ever done here because of the timing of where we are in the Caleb Williams timeline. And so, man, I'm eager later this afternoon, this evening, to start checking my phone and getting some calls from people around the league on how people are reacting, because the attractiveness of this job is going to be up for much debate in the next month and a half. And people are going to have to kind of do their research on what they're signing up to join.
Stan, speaking of debate, take me through your understanding of when they said they were debating on whether or not to fire Matt Eberflus at this point in time.
Yeah, this sounds insane to me that at 7:30 their meeting started, and by 9 they still hadn't decided, and it wasn't until 2 hours after Eberflus got done speaking they decided to fire him?
And there's dissenting voices, obviously, if it's taking that long, and they pointed that out, although we don't know who. It's hard for me to process that, Dan.
Right. And Marshall, because of that, you wish there had been sort of a larger timeline today, or a larger window for us to be able to ask questions until we had satisfactory answers to some very big picture important questions, that would being one of them. And I don't know, I did have an understanding on Friday that because of the structure of the Bears organization, that there are boxes that need to be checked in a termination of a head coach that may make something drag out longer than most people think it should, because you have to clear things through the chairman. The chairman has to go to the board of directors. There's a lot of people who have to be consulted before that decision is sort of finalized to the point of announcing it, right? And letting the world know that this is signed, sealed, delivered. There's no turning back. Boom, it's gone. But like to the point of what was the discussion, I don't know, because I know that every single person, player, coach, support staff, media member that walked out of the Ford Field locker room on Thursday afternoon knew that it was over.
And the understanding is they were all in there for Jalen Johnson's 10 to 15 minutes of whatever it was that he had to say to Matt Eberflus
and other players
and other players getting involved too, right? I mean, it wasn't like Kevin Warren and Ryan Poles weren't in the locker room, right, for that?
Well, so, these locker rooms are big places after football games, and I don't know who was where when. We're not let in until the cooling off period is over. The cooling off period lasted Thursday longer than any cooling off period that I've been a part of, and there's an obvious reason for that, right? Like there was obviously things going on that needed to be cooled off. But so I don't know who was where, because I heard DJ Moore earlier on the morning show say that he kind of was on the opposite end of the room and didn't really hear exactly what Jalen was saying, but he understood that Jalen was upset table, and then you've got to launch into a coaching search that, as we mentioned, is going to have a lot behind it. That's why I say, like dizzy and fatigued right now is the operative emotion, because this is something. I mean, this is really something. And then to hear Thomas Brown, who's got, incredible command of the room, and you like to listen to him, but man, like rewind him 32 days and say, hey, Thomas, guess what? At this time next month, you're going to be the head coach of the Chicago Bears after we fire the offense coordinator who hired you. We fire the head coach who hired you. And then all of a sudden you're going to have a 5-game audition with a team that is going to need to muster every bit of emotional give a damn they have to try to finish this season without being completely embarrassed.
So they wouldn't answer the question about if they were going to use a consultant, a search firm, or some kind of outside or inside committee. And then we got the classic Bears diffusion of responsibility. It's like first Warren had to be nailed down about who makes the final decision. And he says Ryan Poles, which I found interesting, like, well, he's got final decision. He's got it. You say that Warren's in charge, but when, feet to the fire, he said Ryan Poles has final say, his words. And now they're broadening everything into, we'll rely on the think tank here in the building. How much is George going to be involved? How much is the board involved? How much is Virginia involved? Who's in charge?
So let's go back to this final say thing for a minute, because there was great debate inside the media room after everything ended on what exactly happened in that exchange. And there are a lot of divergent takes on what exactly was communicated there.
Oh, really?
My interpretation was that Kevin took a long time to get to a very straightforward answer that Ryan has final say.
And I appreciate you guys pressing him on that, because I was
like,
this is ridiculous.
that this wasn't like, I think there was a moment there where he's like, I have to project an image that I haven't completely neutered my general manager by saying he has final say, but I didn't take that at face value.
And now taking what you're saying about how he looked and how he presented at the podium makes me think that that's really what that was.
So you think he said it, but he didn't mean it?
Correct. And I'll go back and listen to it. I'll go back and watch it. I'll go back and read it 3 times over. And you guys will have a lot of people that are on this beat on the air over the next few days and can ask them how they interpreted it. And we'll sift through it together, as we go forward. But the fact that we have to sift through that tells you how complicated this process is going to be. I did ask the question on how Ryan is going to deal with the apprehension that I know exists out there. I talked to a lot of people over the weekend of potential coaching candidates coming here to this building to work under a general manager who's got a mismatched timeline and whose job security has to be in question at this time next year. It has to be. It should be now, and it's not. And so, like, good luck with that. Good luck trying to get the best possible candidates for this job, and then lure one to take this. Mm-hmm. And then the other part of this, Dan, that you can attest to is this is going to be an exhausting, like 6 to 8 months of having to not buy anything that they're selling with the new guy. Like you can't bite that hook anymore, right? Like this organization has not earned the benefit of the doubt to bite that hook again. And so that's going to be a hard thing to navigate for a guy who's going to come in expressing belief and expressing vision. And you're going to go, okay, dude, like until you have a playoff team and a playoff game at the ready, then I don't really want to listen to it, because we've been duped dozens of times before here for 40 years.
I went through the list. We replayed what Poles said when they announced Matt Eberflus, and about what knocked his socks off the moment he walked into the room. He checked every box, did Eberflus. Leadership, poise, emotional intelligence, a developmental mindset, discipline, detail, and toughness. That's what he said about Matt Eberflus.
Grody and I are going to do a segment on Take the North either today or later this week about how the word culture cannot be uttered by a single leader in this building until there is a 9 in the W column. I'm not going to listen to the word culture one more time until they have a 9 or greater in their win column.
And I laughed out loud when you asked the question about why should somebody taking this job not have trepidation about your contract timeline or your status. And he answered by talking about people know in this Ask People Around about how we treat people in this building. And I'm like, whoa.
What does that have to do with what the question was?
It had nothing to do with what the question was, but ask you about how you treat people in the building. You just clowned the head coach. And then your boss half apologized for it. And not to mention, what was Alan Williams doing to people in the building? Like you're daring to talk about how you treat people in your building?
This has been a failure. And so like I keep circling back to this with the evaluation that Kevin has of his general manager. He asked for power to oversee the general manager, to evaluate the general manager, to decide whether the general manager should stay or go. Well, this general manager oversaw a 10-game losing streak in 2022 that was a franchise record, and everyone offered forgiveness because they were tearing down the roster and they were doing the easy part. The three of us could have done that. We could have torn down a roster and finished with the worst record in football. I think we'd agree that, right?
Yeah.
And so here we are 2 years later with a roster that was built up, with a roster that was expecting to at least contend for a playoff berth in this season.
Time to win is now. That's what we were told.
Marshall, there's a legitimate possibility that they break that record for franchise record losing streak at the end of
I hadn't even thought
the start of January. They could have an 11-game losing streak when the season ends. And so who's culpable for that? Who's accountable for that? Who, answers for the types of failures that consistently go on inside this building? I'm telling you guys, that would be I don't know if there's medication for my dizziness,
That's the GM. So do you think there's no chance, let's say they do lose out. Is there no chance that they won't just clean house?
So I never say no chance, because this league is all about that. And I always say that, when the reports came out yesterday from some of the national.
Feel like they have a timeline in their head, or are they going to wait till the end of the season? I mean, there's several unemployed coaches former head coaches running around. They're obviously trying to get as good a jump as they can on this crisis of sorts and finding, as you said, I think what you said was completely accurate. It's the biggest hire they've made in franchise history because of where they are, who the quarterback is. You could put in all the factors in.
Well, and let's go back to this. Like, you guys can find the soundbite of Ryan on draft weekend saying, like, I'm not going to talk about the past, right? Like, that has nothing to do with us.
Oh, Dan's eating this one alive.
Yeah, that's it. Kevin Warren today. Let's put the past in the past.
Sorry, nope, you have not earned that. You have not earned that right to do that. So you are going to live in the shadow of this past that is really daunting. And by the way, your starting quarterback spent the pre-draft process doing months of research on why this organization has been a failure for 40 years and why they've never developed a quarterback. And he was told by people in this building, we've got you. Those are our transgressions of people that pursue.
Oh, the coverage of this team is on so many other levels than just the game. That there's a game to cover, and we'll talk about it, and there's going to be players making plays. There'll be an outcome of the game, but it all pales in comparison to what is happening behind the scenes. And God, I wish Kalen Kaler could have gotten in that Trace Armstrong question.
We could hear it.
Because it's still looming here. Like, what will the involvement be of Armstrong and other powerful agents, but particularly the one that represents Ryan Poles?
Yeah, and the one who represented Matt and represented the previous Matt as
Waldron.
Well. There's a lot here. I do think this, if you want to have a shred of optimism of where this search can go, one of Kevin Warren's greatest strengths is his network. He has a very, very extensive network of people he knows and people he trusts and people that can point him in the direction.
Stepping to the podium as now no longer the passing coordinator, no longer the offensive coordinator, but he's the interim head coach. First ever in Bears history to be named interim head coach.
Yeah, like I think you'll react to Thomas the way you have the last couple of weeks. He's got a really good way of saying things. He can be funny. He can be direct. I think you understand why players are going to give it their best to try to make this work over the next 5 weeks. I don't know how much is left in the fuel tank around here, and you're going into play 5 football games that are pretty challenging. And it's a big ask for everyone here to try to step up to the challenge of winning a football game, which has been hard enough under calm circumstances, much less amid all this commotion. And so, look, like Thomas he's got to figure a lot of things out here. He's got to figure out how to manage his time, how to distribute it, how to continue to restore order to Caleb's world, how to, communicate with Eric Washington, who's going to be the chief overseer of the defense. There's a lot on Thomas's plate, and you'll hear it in a few minutes on kind of his approach to just being in the moment and taking it, task by task, day by day, and figuring out where all this lands in 5 weeks. We'll all see, and then we'll get to what is usually Black Monday, and we'll go, now what? Because we've been through an awful lot, and it's crazy. Like, sign me up. I've said, like, sign me up to be a producer on the 30 for 30 for whatever this has been this season, because I'm all in.
We'll come up with a title for you, Dan.
Dan, thank you. Your job is just beginning. Appreciate
Yeah, I
it
know.
much.
I told my wife as much. I'll talk to you guys soon.
She